What's up, guys? It's three-time NFL Pro Bowler, all-decade return specialist, Josh Cribbs. I want to welcome you to the College Sports Connection podcast, where Double A, Alex, and AJ host the Mid-American Conference Best.
All right, everybody. Welcome back to the College Sports Connection podcast. I'm your host, Alex the Captain. Joining me as always, AJ the Guru.
What's going on, everybody?
AJ, welcome back. It has been a good couple weeks where we have used the interviews from the MAC Media Day. Different coaches, different schools, gearing up for football season. We're 17 days away from the kickoff of the 2021 MAC football season. I'm excited.
Me too. It's hard to believe here. It's almost that time of year. We camp around the country, not only in the MAC, but everybody's really in camp right now. I think Ohio State starts the season off on a Thursday at Minnesota, and then everything kind of falls into place after that. So it's gonna be a lot of fun. We've got that, and then we've got the NFL starting shortly after that.
Sure.
But with the way we talked to our coaches and player over Media Day, which you guys have listened to, which hopefully you guys enjoyed those interviews as much as we did. Those coaches we spoke to are very excited, very optimistic about this season. That's a full season. They're allowed to have a training camp, which was huge this year. Coaches were very excited about the opportunity for the guys to get in the weight room and work out more and prep for a full season. Unlike last year, it was only 6 games. So these guys are excited. They're ready to chomping at the bit to hit somebody else in another helmet, and we are excited to watch.
Absolutely. And today, we are going to break down how we think the conference is going to shake out. I know who I have going to the MAC championship more than likely doesn't line up with who you have going to the MAC championship, but I'm excited to get into this. We're going to start with the East Division first. I'm going to break down my 1 through 6, starting at the bottom. I'm going to kick it off with the East, finishing in dead last. I got to go with Bowling Green. Right now, they're in rebuild mode, right? They've got a lot of things that they can improve on after last year going 0-6. Have winnable games. I think that's important for them, is to get those winnable games. They've got, I believe it's Murray State and South Alabama coming to Bowling Green, or at least they're playing both of them. But I don't know if they have the ability to win more than 1 or 2 conference games. And that's why I have them sitting at 6 in the East Division.
Yeah, they start off week 1 at Tennessee, and Tennessee's favored by 34 points. So obviously it's a tough way to start the year. Then South Alabama comes to BG, and the following week Murray State comes to BG. Then they're on the road at Minnesota. Then they start MAC season.
Yeah, so I just that non-conference, they could definitely go 2-2, but those 2 wins are going to be sandwiched between Power 5 opponents, and for a BG squad that's trying to rebuild, that's a tough draw right now.
Yeah, absolutely. That is going to be tough for BG, especially if a young squad this year.
Only 11 starters returning.
Only 11 starters returning. Yeah, that's probably less than most MAC schools this year.
Sure.
So, but they could also surprise us. You never know.
They could. They absolutely could. Speaking of surprising stories, I'm moving on to my number 5. Got Akron. We had the chance to talk to Coach Tom Arth at Media Day, and he seemed excited about what his players are ready to do. They are also in kind of a rebuild, but I think that they have a better chance of not finishing dead last, not being the bottom of the conference off of last year and what they did against BG last year. And I want to say it was like 35-0 drubbing of Bowling Green last year. And I think Akron, if they make it through September, I think they've got Auburn and Penn State in the early portion of the season. They've got Auburn, Penn State, and Ohio State, I think. So they've got a pretty rough schedule to start, but they make it through that. There's no reason that this Akron team can't get back to playing at a decent level. Probably won't win the conference. Doesn't matter that they're going to have Cato Nelson back. I think that it's critical. I mean, he led them to the MAC championship appearance back in 2017 where they lost to Toledo. So they were definitely very offensively talented with him under center as a freshman. So if he can get some of that magic back, they could be a sleeper to make it to the MAC championship. More realistically, though, I think they finish towards the bottom of the conference, probably eke out a couple of conference wins, finishing in 5th in the East Division.
Coach Arden was very optimistic this year. He really does like his team, but we kind of with BG in the same boat as they are very young. Having Nelson is huge. But yeah, they are very young, but he's also very excited about this team. I think when we talked to him, this interview was kind of a spur of the moment thing. And, we didn't know a whole lot about Akron, and we talked to him, and then we kind of looked at each other at the end of it saying, this guy is great for the program. We've had Jared Pugsley on, and he talked about the struggles he dealt with in his time at Akron. Mm-hmm. Now I think Akron finally has the right guy. Now it's just about putting all the pieces and parts in the right place, sure. And they'll be onto something.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Akron can definitely build off of what they've seen over the last couple of years and move towards becoming a power in the Mid-American Conference once again. On to number 4, I've got Miami finishing number 4 in the East Division. We don't know much about Miami, not because of just what's out there. I mean, we know rosters, we know depth charts, things like that, but they only played 3 games last season. Miami had the smallest schedule of any team in the MAC. I believe they went 2-1, actually upsetting now reigning MAC champions Ball State in week 1.
Week 1, yeah.
But, Brett Gabbert, he had in 3 games, he had 4 touchdowns, no picks, and completed 67% of his passes. Their road schedule is what is going to be very brutal for them this year. They travel to Muncie, they travel to Athens and play at OU, and then they travel up to Kent State. So I think Miami has some real talent on the offensive side, especially with quarterback Brett Gabbert. But I also think that their defense is a little suspect on paper. For me, I have them finishing 4th in the East Division.
Yeah, you talked about them playing on the road. They open up week 1 at Cincinnati, then head to Minnesota for week 2. They host Long Island week 3, then they're off to Army at week 4. Mm-hmm. So they can go 2-2 in that non-conference, fairly easy. Army might be tough, so maybe 1-3, but still, then they open up with Central Michigan for the MAC season at home.
Sure.
Hey, you mentioned they go to Muncie, they go to Athens, they go to Kent. Those are all tough places to play.
Sure.
And, we didn't get to talk to him, unfortunately, but Sorensen, the receiver, had a fantastic year last year. And I think he's somebody who you can look towards this year. Yeah, Jack Sorensen, he 18 receptions, 354 yards, 4 touchdowns. He averaged almost 20 yards at reception until I think he got hurt there later on.
Yeah.
Week or game 2 or 3. But nevertheless, he's going to be one of those guys that that's going to be kind of dependent on Gabbert's going to depend on him a lot this year.
Sure. And I think,
and you look at it too, they went through 3 quarterbacks last year in only 3 games.
Yeah, they didn't have a lot of consistency under center. I think having Brett Gabbert back this year will be critical as the established starter. So I hope for their sake that they can keep him healthy, because I think he does bring a lot, especially that combo of Gabbert to Sorensen. I think that's a pretty talented combo right there and could easily challenge or at least make a push to win the MAC East. But I have them sitting at number 4.
Definitely. It's interesting too, because you look at it here, Miami only ran the ball 100 times last year for 381 yards. Mm-hmm. Sorensen led receivers with 18 receptions for 354. And the second place guy, Fort Wayne guy, Mac Pippenhammer, I believe he was a transfer from Penn State, wasn't he?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, he's a Fort Wayne kid. He had 5 receptions for 77. So there's a massive drop off there.
Sure.
Between 1 and 2. But like we talked about, it's going to be a full season. These guys are going to get the reps, and they've had an entire offseason to get prepared and get ready too. So I think this offseason benefits Miami more than it does any other MAC program.
I think so. Yeah, I can definitely agree with that, especially given that they didn't have many bumps and bruises from the previous season. They didn't play many games from the previous season. This is a real chance for them to really fine tune what they're doing in the weight room, in the film room, just really get everything in sync and get ready to kick off the season here against Cincinnati down in Cincinnati. So I have them at number 4. Moving on to my number 3. This is where I went back and forth for a while. My number 3 in the East, I'm picking the Buffalo Bulls. They were the number 1 team in the MAC last year until the MAC championship game. And it wasn't even close. I remember you and I talking about how bad we expected them to kind of wax Ball State in the MAC championship. And they just didn't. But I think right now you lost Coach Lance Leipold. You lost a lot of players over to Kansas with the transfer following Coach Leipold. But I think a lot of people are forgetting, after losing Jarrett Patterson, you still have a stud of a running back in Kevin Marks. Mm-hmm. I think and then you've got Kyle Van Treese under center again for Buffalo. So, I mean, those guys have a little bit of chemistry. They know how to work together. Wouldn't surprise me to see them contend, but I don't think that they're going to be finishing towards the top. Too much has happened in Buffalo. I think there's going to be a significant drop off from a year ago. Losing Jarrett Patterson is tough. You still have Kevin Marks, but I just think that this is a really, really tough team or tough schedule for this team to go back to Detroit again. Hoping for their sake they prove me wrong.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, if you talk about teams that were hit hard by transfer, I don't know if there was another team who was hit harder than Buffalo when you look at the grand scheme of things. But yeah, Marks, we saw him play a lot in the MAC championship because the injury to Patterson. So he did have a fantastic game. Van Treese is a good quarterback. He'll be able to get you wins, but to get you back to Detroit is going to be tough. But only time will tell. And as long as everybody stays healthy, obviously a new coach, his system, how many guys buy in quickly, and they have to buy in really quickly because Leopold left right before camp started, I believe, before spring ball.
Yeah.
And so, he hasn't had a whole lot of time with the guys. And so they're kind of to get up to speed quickly. But they'll be a fun team to watch because they start off week 1 with Wagner and go to Nebraska. Then they host Coastal Carolina, that'll be a really fun game. Have a ranked 22nd Coastal Carolina come into town. Then at Old Dominion, then they start the MAC season.
Sure. Yeah, I think it'll be an interesting early test. I mean, that September schedule looks fairly easy, save Coastal Carolina. And I still think that's a team they can beat if they play some solid defense the way they did in their bowl game. But that September schedule is easy. It's going to get a lot harder come October. But Buffalo is my number 3 for the East.
They have to have the easiest non-conference schedule in the conference.
Pretty close. If not the easiest, definitely one of the easiest.
Because Nebraska is very beatable.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We've moving on to my number 2, and this is where I really, really struggled. My number 2 and my number 1 aren't what a lot of people are picking. My number 2, I've got Kent State. I think Kent State has one of the best offenses in the MAC with Dustin Crum under center. Last year, he had almost 1,200 yards passing, 12 touchdowns, 75% completions. Their biggest weakness, and I think it'll be a weakness again, their defense. They can score a lot of points, but their defense leaks like a sieve, averaging 38 points per contest, including 70 last year to the Buffalo Bulls. 500 yards on the ground in that game. I mean, Jarrett Patterson just ran all over him. And that's what they knew worked, right? Is Kent State has a very weak run defense. And I think that their schedule early on, we're going to learn a lot about this Kent State team very quickly. They've got Texas A&M, Iowa, and Maryland that they have to play against. I think they have the hardest non-conference schedule in the MAC this year because none of those games are going to be easy wins. They're going to have to grind and show up and really just try to outscore them for 60 minutes because there's no way that this Kent State team will compete with those teams for all 4 quarters unless they can keep scoring.
Yeah, absolutely. That was one thing we learned at Media Day. Is Kent State was kind of a hot topic amongst the media, wanting to talk to them because they are favorite. I'm not going to say a perennial favorite, but they are a favorite to end at the top of the MAC because of their quarterback play. They do have a fantastic quarterback coming back. And I'm sorry for finding my stats here. Yeah, Dustin Crum threw for 1,100 yards last year, almost 1,200. You look at his completion rate. I mean, he was 83 of 113 for 1,181 yards, playing 73%. Boy, you look at rushing, he only had 1,000 yards on the year.
Yeah.
So they're going to lean heavily on Crum to kind of motor this team through the season. But you mentioned that schedule. You know, A&M is tough, VMI, and then at Iowa, at Maryland. Then they finally are home for BG. But I mean, that's a very, very tough non-conference schedule. One SEC team and 2 Big Ten teams. But then I don't know if I consider Maryland a Big Ten team anymore. But nevertheless, they are in the conference. And so they do have it rough those first 4 weeks. But, you know, who knows? Maybe they do. Maybe Crum, he's projected to be the top quarterback in the MAC this year. If not if he may be the top. And so, you know, we'll see. He's got a great opportunity, though. I mean, the average 49 points a game last year and scored a total of 199 points with 27 total touchdowns.
Sure.
And, you know, go through a full season, those numbers they're going to bounce up and they could be impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think he has all the potential in the world. This is his big shot to prove that he's an elite quarterback in the country. And I think he is. So this is an opportunity for him to really showcase that. Getting those big road trips to Texas A&M, Iowa, and Maryland, good opportunity to perform on a national and more regional stage, let people really see what he's all about.
Sure. Yeah, Crum was kind of hard to get at media day. There's a lot of people around him wanting to talk.
Yes, that he was one that we wanted, but we're unable to get, which is fine. We'll get him next time. We've got my number one. And we can dive into your East predictions. I've got the Ohio University Bobcats picked to finish first in the East Division. For me, they just have such an incredible defense. That's something they've always been able to do, is just play really great defense. Last year, they did only play 3 games, similar to Miami, but they held opponents to under 20 points in each game. That was what they were averaging. I think it was like 18 points that they were averaging a game that they allowed. They are going to get tougher games at home. Like you've got Kent State and Toledo both visiting OU. And then I think that there is going to be a fairly seamless transition from Frank Solich because everybody on the staff has stayed the same. I've been watching them. There have not been any staff changes or any significant staff changes that I've seen. I think that this roster has stayed together very well. They're not an old team, but they're not a young team either. They've got experience. This is going to be a team who comes to play. I think we could really see what they do when they get, again, Toledo, Kent State, Central Michigan, all going to OU. Could be an interesting test to see how good this OU team is once they get into the meat of the conference schedule.
Definitely, you know, they're one of the teams too, kind of like Buffalo, where they're adding a new coach later into camp. And so it's really, even though he was with the program, they're still going to have to buy into his philosophy because I believe he was an offensive coordinator.
I believe so, yeah.
Prior. Yeah. And so, you know, he's going to be the head coach now, which is obviously going to be different. But it's nice too if these guys, it gives these guys some stability because they gave him a 4-year contract. He's not just an interim coach. So that's kind of one of those nice distractions you don't have to really worry about, especially when it comes to playing, not only playing, but recruiting as well for OU. And so I think you're right. It has a great opportunity to be a seamless transition with him being in the program. And I'm sure many of his philosophies are going to be the same as Frank Solich.
Sure. And I think it'll be really interesting to see what they end up doing under his tutelage. And I'm excited to see what OU brings to the table. They are my East Division champion. That is who I am picking to win the East. Did you have any thoughts or any rankings you would change? Where are you at with the East Division?
Yeah, I'm gonna pull up my numbers here real quick, my rankings. I think ours are fairly similar, but we do have a couple different changes here. Obviously, I start off with BG starting in last.
Sure.
Or finishing last. Then after them, I had Akron. I hated putting them so low because Coach Arn is such a great guy to talk to,
Sure.
but they are extremely young.
Yes.
They are very young. And then after them, I had Buffalo. They're going to fall off a little bit, even though they do return some star players with a new coach and with how kind of ravaged they were by transfers, both on offense and defense. They're going to be plugging in a lot of new guys this year because they were loaded with talent last year.
Mm-hmm.
And who was that receiver they lost in transfer?
It wasn't Nunn, was it?
It was Nunn. Yep.
Was it Nunn? Okay.
Yes. And I believe so. And he was a stud. And so, obviously he's going to be a huge loss. Let me pull him up here real quick. Well, he went to the NFL, actually.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. He didn't transfer.
That's right.
I think he went to the league.
He went to the NFL. Yeah, he left early. Yeah, he's at the Falcons now.
Yep.
Man, I thought they lost somebody too.
They lost a lot of players. I felt like every single day for a couple of weeks we were seeing Buffalo player transfers. Yep,
right. Trevor Wilson, he went to Kansas.
That's right.
He went to Kansas. Let's see here. Giovanni Ruiz is still there. Mm-hmm. Let's see. I'm just going down the list here. But yeah, obviously losing Nunn is huge. And Wilson was their second leading receiver last year.
Mm-hmm.
And also obviously Mark's down here as well, who had he was very active in the receiving game last year. As well.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so I mentioned Buffalo there finishing as second to last there. And then I went OU. I know their defense is great. That offense is still going to be a little worrisome, I think.
Okay.
They did struggle on that side of the ball last year. If my numbers want to pull up here, that'd be great. Here we go. Well, you can never like technology, can you?
No.
So I'm looking at their stats last year. O'Rourke threw for 387 yards. He was 30 of 44. Now, obviously, this is all a COVID year, shortened season. But they only ran the ball for 403 yards in 3 games. That's not great. And whether that's play calling, whether that's offensive line play, who knows? I mean, Tuggle was a leading running back. He averaged 7.6 yards a carry, and he had 6 touchdowns. There's only 8 rushing touchdowns. He had 6 of them. And there was 4 receiving touchdowns all last year. So I think that OU offense is going to be a little worrisome. I like the defense though. Hopefully that defense can keep them in the ball game, and I think they can do that. Let's see here. Where am I at now? Second place. I had Miami, actually. I'm still high on Miami. Okay. I do like Sorensen, and I do like Gabbert. They obviously did knock off Ball State last year, week 1. That was either an overtime game or like a last-minute game. I forget.
It was a last-minute game, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I really do like them. I think Gabbert, given a full season healthy, he can do great things for that Red Hawk offense because they've proven they can move the ball. Mm-hmm. I think once everybody's healthy and having a full camp is huge for them as well. And so I think they're going to benefit greatly here from this offseason. And in first place, I have Kent. I really like Kent. I like Crum. He's one of those guys who we mentioned we wanted to talk to at Media Day, but just didn't have the opportunity to. He threw for over almost 1,200 yards last year. Mm-hmm. Threw 12 touchdowns. When looking at him, he's obviously projected to be one of the top quarterback in the MAC. I disagree with that. There's another quarterback I think who will be a little higher than him, but we'll get to that later. But yeah, Dustin Crum has a phenomenal opportunity here. He's going into a senior year and starting off week 1 at Texas A&M. I think there's no other better place for a quarterback to make a statement than down there at College Station. That's what it's called. Yeah,
College Station.
So, College Station. Ball State started off down there a couple of years ago and got hammered. But nevertheless, they had Myles Garrett on their team, so
sure,
that's gonna kind of happen.
It kind of tells you the story of that game.
That does, and we had a freshman quarterback. It was Riley Neal's freshman year.
Yep, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, I don't think he started. I think Ozzie Mann started, but then Riley came in halfway through. It just didn't get any better.
Okay,
but yeah,
so
that's
you got Kent State winning the East Division. All right, I like it. That's A little bit different for both of us. I'm picking the Bobcats to win it. How poetic would it be for Frank Solich, who worked so hard at OU for all those years, and then his team gets back to the MAC championship the year after he leaves? That would just, how insane would that be?
Absolutely. It was so cool kind of talking to the commissioner about Frank Solich, his impact on the MAC,
Mm-hmm.
and how greatly he will be missed. And obviously we were bummed because we wanted to talk to him. He was our number one guest since we started the podcast.
Yep.
And of course he decides to retire a week or two prior.
Literally the week right before media day.
Yeah. But they did a really cool tribute video to him. That was fun to watch.
Mm-hmm.
I think we actually we retweeted that at one point out from our account.
Yep.
If you haven't seen it, go check it out. But yeah, it's going to be weird looking at that sideline because he'd been on that sideline for what, 16, something like that?
16 seasons now.
Yeah. And so he had a lot of big wins, a lot of big upsets versus Power 5 schools. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of funny too, because after he retired, many Nebraska fans kind of came out and said, yeah, Nebraska made a huge mistake by firing him.
Yep.
So, they're the MAC and OU definitely benefited off of that happening.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now moving on to the West Division. This is the tougher of the two divisions, I think. And I think that's a pretty universally recognized fact, is that the West Division is just traditionally tougher than the East Division, top to bottom. The West Division is always so hard to pick because any given week, any of these teams could rise up and take the division. Starting with my number 6, though, as much as I love talking to Coach Thomas Hammock, I got to go Northern Illinois. They have, I think if they played in the East Division, they would probably be sitting 4th in my rankings. But being it over here in the West Division, I mean, they get to play Toledo, they get to play Central Michigan, they get to play Western Michigan, Ball State. Like, the team they could beat, I think, would be Eastern Michigan. They did get transfer from Michigan State, Rocky Lombardi, who looks to be the starting quarterback for this team. Interestingly enough, if Rocky Lombardi and Northern Illinois upset Michigan this year, Rocky Lombardi will be the only quarterback in college football history to beat Michigan at 2 different schools during his undergrad.
That's impressive.
How insane would that be? Now, obviously, we have to hope Northern Illinois can do that. And we're obviously cheering for the Huskies in that game. But that would be just an absolutely crazy stat to have as a quarterback. And to not only do it from being a Big Ten quarterback, but then now you go to the perceived lesser conference of the Mid-American Conference and then do it again. To me, that would be crazy. But
it would be. And that's a huge pickup too for NIU, getting a quarterback who has experience in big games like that.
Sure, absolutely. And I think that's going to benefit them. But I also think that, there's a lot of emotion in those games. He's not going to have the same talent level receivers, same offensive line that he had at Michigan State. Maybe a slightly worse, given the nature of Michigan State and everything. But I think Rocky's going to have his work cut out for him, especially playing in front of Michigan's home crowd of 110,000. That being said, Northern Illinois, they're only returning 10 starters from last year's team, which isn't bad, especially for this team they literally blew it up last year, didn't just kind of toss in the towel, said, hey, we're just going to use this year to gain experience. That's not bad for a team trying to gain experience, but only 10 starters makes that really, really tough to build on, especially because it's not consistent on one side of the ball or the other. I think it's 5 and 5 on either side. Mm-hmm. So that's really tough for Northern Illinois.
No, it really is. And, we had a great conversation with Coach Hammock about this season and what he expects from his players. And look, this is a guy who, made me want to run through a brick wall. A fantastic coach. These guys are very lucky to have him, being a former Husky himself and having coached in the National Football League for many years. I think they've got a great opportunity to maybe not pull up an upset up in Ann Arbor, but maybe keep the game close.
Sure, absolutely. I think, and that'll be a critical point in the season. Sure, it's an early September game, but that'll be a critical moment in defining what this season is going to be for the Huskies.
Absolutely, because I can remember the years not too long ago where Northern Illinois was, not only MAC recognized, but nationally recognized.
Sure.
With Jordan Lynch and a couple guys who made it to the National Football League.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So that's where I have Northern Illinois sitting. Moving on to my number 5, Eastern Michigan. They return one of the deepest teams in the Mid-American Conference, but they also were a team that went 2-4 last year. This is a team that is led by Preston Hutchinson. And he did a phenomenal job last year. I mean, they were scoring almost 35 points a game every single game. And their non-conference really isn't bad, except for the game that they travel to Wisconsin. Like, you look at that non-conference schedule and you're like, okay, they could easily go 3-1, save the Wisconsin game. And I think that they have a couple solid conference games with games at Bowling Green and against Northern Illinois, but I don't see them moving higher than, I don't know, 6-6, 7-5 at best overall, just because they've got so many more talented teams sitting right ahead of them. This is not an Eastern Michigan squad that I think can do such a complete turnaround where they'll go and win the MAC championship. Going from 2-4 to 11-2, tall task, a very difficult one to complete, especially in the West Division of the Mid-American Conference.
It really is. There's some, you look at this side of the conference here, there's probably 3 teams who, if they were in the East, could compete to win it, if not finish second place. The West is just so competitive, and it's not going to get any less competitive here, especially when you go to the top 3 teams, which I'm sure our top 3 teams are fairly similar, just in a different order. Sure. But yeah, the West is just so tough. And you look at, I believe last year, every team in the West played all 6 games, didn't they?
Yeah, every West all 6 games. It was the East that was in complete shambles with COVID.
Yeah. So it's going to be a great opportunity. I think Eastern Michigan, as long as they keep things competitive, we obviously did not get to talk to anybody from Eastern. I wanted to, we just didn't have time.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of one of the interesting things too about Media Day being in Detroit. Eastern, Western, and Central were very popular amongst the local media. So it's kind of hard to get a hold of some of those guys,
sure,
and talk ball with them.
Sure.
But nevertheless, we were able to for Central, which was a lot of fun. But
sure.
Yeah, Eastern, they're going to struggle. But, I do like Hutchinson, though. I really do like their quarterback. I think he has an opportunity. He threw for 1,600 yards last year. He throws a very nice deep ball. You kind of pulling up some stats here from the team last year. 33.5 points a game, 201 total points with 24 total touchdowns. He can sling it. And, that's something he's going to have to do in order to win ball games this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And it'll be interesting to see. I think that they can definitely get to the 6-6 mark. I just don't think we'll be seeing them compete for the MAC championship this year, which is fine. There's still a program that's still, they're really trying to understand. Chris Creighton has done an excellent job of turning them around from being a bottom dweller to a team who has consistently beat Big Ten opponents on a regular basis. So Eastern Michigan on the rise. Don't see them getting past 5th in the West Division. My 4th place team, however, is one of their in-state rivals, Central Michigan. Jim McElwain returning for his 3rd season up at Central Michigan. Big test on the road in the first month, the month of September. We've got 2 games against 2 SEC Tigers, both LSU and Missouri. But I think that this is a good team who has a lot of talent, who can really step up and play some ball with almost anybody in the Mid-American Conference. I do have them sitting at 4th because I think they have tough road games at Western and at Toledo. But I do think Central Michigan is a team that they catch you at the right time, they can beat you. So sitting at 4th, sitting at 4th, Central Michigan. Watch for this team to pull a few upsets.
Yeah, absolutely. You kind of look at the schedule. They go to Missouri, then they go travel to LSU week 3. Coach McElwain was kind of very blunt with us when we talked about LSU, and obviously he's coached in the SEC, so he knows how that works. And he goes, "Look, this is a money game for us." And he kind of flat out said that, which kind of took me back a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that having his experience benefits Central more than any other team in the conference.
Sure.
The simple fact that he's played in Death Valley before, he's prepped for prime time against LSU before. So he knows what it's like. Obviously, it is prime time.
Yep.
7:30 on the SEC network. So he's played night games at Death Valley, so he gets it.
But how brutal is that you're a MAC team and you have to go play them in a primetime game at their stadium? That's just brutal.
That's a tough way to start the season, definitely. But I mean, I can see them going to Missouri and beating them though very easily.
Sure.
You know, Missouri's a team who's been kind of irrelevant for a number of years. They're only favored by 13 points.
That 13 points isn't much, honestly, especially from a MAC to an SEC team.
No, they don't have the line out yet for LSU, but they could easily go to Missouri and win that because they did it against Oklahoma State a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
At OK State, too.
Man, a lot of Oklahoma State people listening to this, all one of them are shuddering listening to
absolutely
bring that memory back up.
Nightmares as we record this a quarter after 9:00.
But yeah, so I agree with you. Central Michigan, it's brutal September schedule, but we'll see what happens. I think that they've got a lot of potential, a lot of star power that is untapped, but they do benefit from having Coach McElwain as probably the most heavily seasoned coach in the conference. Like you said, when he coached at Florida and coaching in the SEC and, all of his different stops, definitely one of the more seasoned veteran coaches in the conference coming back for his third season.
Yeah, they definitely have a quarterback too who doesn't get talked about a lot. Daniel Richardson. I think he's got a great opportunity to become a kind of a under the radar star in the MAC conference this year.
Sure. No, absolutely. I think he's got a good opportunity in front of him as well. He doesn't get talked about because there are a few other quarterbacks in the conference we'd like to talk about, such as the quarterback for my number 3 team, Caleb Elby from Western Michigan, the last of the divisional Michigans or the directional Michigans on my ranking, coming in at number 3. This is where I think things get shaken up a little bit. We've got Western Michigan probably has the best offense in the conference solely because LB is such a phenomenal dual threat quarterback. He only had 2 interceptions last year to 18 touchdowns. It's a 9-to-1 ratio. That's impressive. I don't care, I don't care what level of football you play. That's not something you see very often. So I'm very impressed with him as a player. They had a miracle win against Toledo a year ago when Toledo collapsed, gave up, their 10-point lead in the last 5 minutes. So I think this Western team gets lucky, but I also think that they understand that the game's not over until it's over. I mean, they almost upset Ball State, or they almost beat Ball State at the end of the season last year to go to the MAC championship game. This is a Western team that has a lot of fight. I really do see them contending and probably knocking off one of the 2 teams in front of them. But I think that they're also a team who can lose games that they shouldn't lose, such as the Eastern Michigan game last year, which is what I think will keep them out of the Mid-American Conference Championship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they open up week 1 at Michigan in the Big House, and Michigan's only favored by 17.5 points. That's not a lot. And side note too, I'm looking at their logo, and I think I'm looking at the Washington football team logo. Like, it's just not great. Awful. Come on, Western.
Yeah.
And they did that the day before media day or something like that.
It was like the week or 2 weeks before media day, and it's by the fans, it's not been very well received because, like you said, it does look like the Washington football team logo. By the athletes, I'm sure that there's a mix of emotions, but it seems like from what I see on online chatter, everybody wants the Ghost Bronco back.
Right. No, that was a great looking Bronco.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mentioned they start off week 1 at Ann Arbor, then they host Illinois State, the Redbirds, their week 2, travel to Pitt week 3. That'll be a tough one. And then they come home for San Jose State, who is not great against MAC schools, as we learned last year.
Sure.
In the Arizona Bowl. So they have an opportunity they can go 2-2 in their non-conference very easily. And their first conference game is at Buffalo. Then they host Ball State. So, that's my wedding day too.
That Ball State Western Michigan game will be a rematch of last year's MAC West Division title game, which was again, a game that came right down to the finish, which was just a phenomenal finish for both squads. Ball State ultimately topping Western Michigan in that game to advance to the MAC championship game. But man, what a finish for Ball State and Western, both just playing their hearts out with a trip to Detroit on the line.
Sure. Yeah, hopefully that game is early because I get married that afternoon. So
yeah, I'm hoping it's early for you as well.
Let's hope.
Moving to number 2, and this is where I know for sure you and I will differ. I've got the Ball State Cardinals finishing in second. Yes, they are the reigning MAC champions. They have 10 starters on offense that just absolutely they played well. They played to their strengths. They weren't flashy, and I think that's one of the big things. They weren't flashy until the MAC championship game and until the bowl game. They just came out, they put their heads down, they worked in the trenches, and they focused. Quarterback Drew Plitt, we had a chance to talk with him. Classy guy, very good dresser, I think, as you pointed out on the show. And you could just tell he's hungry. He wants to win another MAC title. He wants to go out and he wants to win. He wants to compete. I think the game that I have circled on my calendar, and I think most Ball State and Toledo fans have circled, is that Ball State Toledo game. Ball State topped Toledo last year on a late interception as Toledo was driving. And that ultimately sealed the deal for Ball State to win that game. I do believe Ball State will bring a lot of firepower into this game, a lot of firepower into the season. It's a rough schedule. You start off at Penn State, you play Wyoming, and those are both on the road. And then 2 of their first 3 conference games are at Eastern and at Western Michigan. So you've got a brutal first portion of the schedule. You survive that first portion, Ball State might have a shot. I still think the game to circle on the calendar is Toledo at Ball State.
Yeah, that's going to be a huge one. That's just 2 high-powered offenses, as we mentioned. What Drew say, or I think it was neither New or Drew Plitt said they have like 20-some starters coming back in total.
I think it was Coach New said that they had something like 20 starters returning,
which is huge.
Yeah,
especially coming off the first ever MAC championship and first bowl win of their of the school's history. But yeah, against Toledo, that's going to be that'd be a great game on. Well, when is that? Let's pull up the schedule here.
I want to say that's
it's early on in the season too, so that's the first. Yeah,
I was going to say it's like October 5th or something like that.
Yeah, October 25th. 25th. That's right. Because we were supposed to try to go to that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that'll be a great game to be at. Great game to watch. Mm-hmm. It's interesting too because they go from the MAC to a non-conference back to the MAC. They go to UMass. They're week 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Week 5 rather.
A former MAC team there.
Yeah, former MAC team. Yeah, so that'll be a good one to watch too. But you obviously mentioned Toledo and Notre Dame. They're week 2. That'll be a fun one to watch. But then again, you're not going to be able to watch it. Where are you going?
Trying to figure it out.
Yeah, because that's on Peacock, so not everybody's going to be able to watch it.
Right, which is really unfortunate. And we'll talk about Toledo here in a minute, but that's really unfortunate that Notre Dame and NBC had that game bumped to Peacock, because that was a chance for Toledo to play on a national stage against a national brand, and now you're limiting the market. I think it's just a poor business decision all around, because yes, Notre Dame's still going to get their money from the licensing deal, but it's just a poor business decision all around, in my opinion.
Yeah, it really is. I'm kind of interested to see how that does turn out.
Sure.
But yeah, you mentioned you have Ball State at number 2, which obviously puts Toledo at number 1.
Toledo at number 1, 21 starters returning, probably the second best offense in the MAC overall. Their biggest glaring weakness, who's going to be under center, DeQuan Finn or Carter Bradley? And I know when we talked to Coach Candle at Media Day, we asked him about, are they going to do a split duty like Austin Danton and Terrence Owens? He says, no, we're going to install one offense, and we're going to go with the guy who can run the offense. So I think that's critical, right? This is a team who wants to win, hasn't been back to Detroit since 2017. They do go to Ball State. However, they get to host both Western and Eastern Michigan. Big road test will be at OU, and big road test will be at Ball State. They could easily go 3-1 in non-conference play. The one loss coming to Notre Dame. But Notre Dame, they catch Notre Dame on a short week. Notre Dame playing on a primetime Sunday night at Florida State right before they come home to play Toledo. So Notre Dame, a lot of emotion. Toledo gets to play Norfolk State to open the season. So you get a nice little warm-up game. The last time Toledo played a Power 5 opponent after a warm-up game, Arkansas versus Toledo. Toledo pulled the upset back in 2015 at Arkansas. Not saying it's going to happen here, but Arkansas was ranked then. Notre Dame will be ranked going into this game, barring a loss to Florida State. I'm saying anything can happen if you keep the game close in the fourth quarter. It'll be interesting to see. But I do like Toledo's chances to finish the season 10-2. I think that there's a lot going on. I think Carter Bradley is probably the way to go with Toledo, getting him under center, because he's going to have the most experience of anybody on this roster. I think you got to go with the guy with the experience to give you the best chance to win. Just that's who I think does it. And my prediction is Toledo versus Ohio in the MAC championship, Toledo winning it 28-24.
All right. I mean, I kind of gave you my 2 cents into the teams, what I thought about them. So kind of like my finishing last in the West is Eastern Michigan.
Sure.
Then I went with NIU, then Central Michigan, then Western, then Toledo, then Ball State. I just think, obviously, Ball State's going to be an obvious choice for me just because it's my school. But also talking to Drew Plitt and Mike New, their energy being back in Ford Field a couple of months after winning the MAC championship for the first time, you could tell they were still just pumped. They both had that glow, if you will, when we started talking about it. They were both excited. It was a similar feeling. As Drew said, because I asked Drew, is it the same feeling walking in here as it was walking out in December? He goes, it's the same feeling, but it's a new mission. And that mission is simple, and it's just to get back to Detroit. And they have all the talent in the world to do so. Obviously, Drew Plitt coming back is massive. He's great for the program. He's somebody who is very similar to Coach New in the way they think and the way they approach the game. Looking numbers wise here, obviously we lost Caleb Hutley. He missed the last 2 games of the year because he had opted out. But Taylor Evans is huge. Jordan Hall's back. Justin Hall. He's back for his senior year. He had 665 yards receiving with 4 touchdowns. That's a massive target for Drew.
Sure.
Johannes Tyler. So there's a lot of talent here. Cody Rudy, a fullback. You don't see very many fullbacks anymore. He had a nice bowl game last year. So there's a lot of talent surrounding Drew Plitt in the offense, and it's just going to be a matter of executing. And I saw on social media today, I think it was the offense won in scrimmage, and so they got Kona Ice, which is a shaved ice stand in Muncie. So they brought that to the stadium, and the offense who won got shaved ice. And so Coach New seems like one of those guys who likes to keep his players loose. He's done a great job of that last year. It's taken him a couple of years to kind of find his way, if you will. And he finally has the right guys in the right spot. And, Drew Plitt threw for 2,154 yards last year in 6 games, which is a great number to put up. He was 164 for 250, 65% completion rate. I think he's looking to continue that this year. And, we talked about their non-conference schedule. They've got a tough one. Like you mentioned, they start with Western Illinois, then travel to Penn State, then to Wyoming, then host Toledo, then they host Army.
Mm-hmm.
So Happy Valley is going to be tough, but I don't think anything scares these guys. I think they have a great opportunity to go into Happy Valley at 3:30 kickoff.
Yep.
And Coach New mentioned that the noise is going to be one of the biggest things they have to compete with. And I think that's something they haven't come out with the odds yet for it. But I think this is a game that Ball State can be competitive in. Will they win it? I don't know, but they can stay competitive. They're not get blown out.
Sure. No, I think you're right. I think this will be a very unique season. A lot of these MAC teams, especially the ones that we have ranked towards the top, are returning a lot of starters. And I think that'll be the difference maker. I really do. I think The guys that we see at the bottom returning, 8 to 10 to 12 starters. That's great, good foundation building blocks. But the teams returning 18, 19, 20, 21 starters, you're going to be hard pressed to compete with that. Guys who are seasoned, know the system, understand what's expected versus guys who are starting freshmen and backups. I think it'll be a really interesting season. So, and you have Ball State finishing to repeat, right? You have them
Yes.
beating Kent State in the finals, right?
Beating Kent State, yep.
Okay.
And what a quarterback duel that would be.
Oh man, yeah, Plitt versus Crum. I'd pay big bucks to see that.
Absolutely.
So cool. Well, there you guys have it. I have Toledo winning the West, beating Ohio in the MAC championship. Ohio coming out of the East. AJ has picked Ball State to beat Kent State in the MAC championship. Ball State out of the West, Kent State out of the East. 4 different teams, 12 different programs in the MAC. One of them has to make it, right?
Somebody does, and hopefully it's the right one.
Right, exactly. So, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. We really appreciate it. We are going to get back on our regular recording schedule, get you guys more MAC content, get you up to date on recaps, on predictions, previews, things like that. So please, please, please keep sharing it out. Please keep retweeting it, liking our content, helping us grow. We're at almost 1,000 followers on Twitter. So the more engagement, more interaction we get from you guys, the better we can grow the brand. We really do appreciate the love and support. That's about all I have. AJ, do you have anything else you wanted to throw out there?
Yeah, you guys continue to share our content. It helps us dramatically. We're also going to work on getting some guests here the next couple of weeks. We have a couple of ideas of how we want to do things and who we want to talk to. So hopefully we can get something. And I think they're actually non-football related too. So that'll be kind of cool to get one last non-football interview in here before we start the heavy into football season.
Sure.
We're going to start doing a recap of MAC rookies in the NFL here this preseason. We're going to tweet out their stats on a graphic. We did that the other day.
Mm-hmm.
You did that rather. That turned out to be a really cool idea, and that actually turned out really good. That got a lot of interaction. So we're going to continue to do that through the preseason and hopefully through the rest of the NFL regular season. And kind of do up to date with what players made rosters, which didn't, and so on and so forth. But yeah, continue the likes, the shares, everything. It really does help us, and we'll continue to bring you guys content.
Cool. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in. We really appreciate it, and we will see you next week.
See you.